The music was too loud, the drinks were too sweet, and I hated every second of it. Jenna dragged me to her company's annual Thanksgiving bash, an event I avoided like the plague every year. But this time she insisted, no, demanded, I come. It's important to me, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Jenna was like that. When she wanted something, she got it. The venue was obnoxiously luxurious, one of those rooftop lounges with glass walls and fake chandeliers. I could see the city skyline stretching out in every direction, but all I felt was trapped. Jenna, on the other hand, was thriving. She was at the center of it all, laughing, throwing her head back in that way that always made people gravitate toward her. I stood near the bar, nursing a drink I didn't even like, watching her hold court with her colleagues. She looked stunning, wearing a dress that shimmered every time she moved. I should have been proud to call her my wife, but instead, there was this knot in my gut I couldn't shake. Something was wrong. She'd barely spoken to me all night, other than to snap. Don't just stand there looking bored, Andrew. Try to socialize. Socialize with who? Her coworkers didn't care about me. I was just the husband, a +1 nobody remembered. Jenna disappeared into the crowd soon after, leaving me standing there, feeling like a prop. An hour passed, then 2. I saw her flitting from group to group, her glass never empty, her laugh a little too loud. My patience was running thin. I thought about leaving, just slipping out and texting her to get an Uber home. But something kept me there. Call it instinct, call it stubbornness. I couldn't leave. Around midnight, I decided I'd had enough. I finished my drink, checked my watch, and headed toward the exit. That's when I heard it. A muffled sound, coming from the hallway near the restrooms. At first, I thought it was just some drunk couple messing around. But then I heard it again. Soft, breathy, unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I crept toward the sound, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The party noise faded as I got closer, replaced by a rhythmic thumping and low whispers. I recognized one of the voices immediately. Jenna. I froze, staring at the closed bathroom door. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't her. But deep down, I knew. The handle moved, and I jumped back, pressing myself against the wall. The door cracked open, and a man stepped out, adjusting his tie. I didn't recognize him, but he looked smug, like he just won some kind of prize. He didn't see me. Then Jenna walked out. Her hair was a mess, her lipstick smudged. She looked flushed, but not like she'd been dancing. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy laughing under her breath, muttering something I couldn't make out. But when she finally turned her head and our eyes locked, her smile vanished. Andrew, she said, her voice sharp, defensive. What are you doing here? I stared at her, my mouth dry, my fists clenched. What am I doing here? What kind of question was that? I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. And then, as if she hadn't just been caught sneaking out of a bathroom with some random guy, she rolled her eyes. You're overreacting, she said, brushing past me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I stood there, stunned. As she disappeared back into the party, I didn't know what I expected her to do. Apologize? Break down in tears and beg for forgiveness? What I didn't expect was for her to act like I was some kind of inconvenience, like I was the one who ruined the night. The audacity of it hit me like a freight train, and before I knew it, my legs were moving. Jenna, I called, my voice cutting through the noise of the party. Heads turned, but she didn't stop. She was already halfway across the room, weaving through the crowd like nothing had happened. I pushed past people, ignoring their startled looks and muttered complaints. She was heading toward the bar, grabbing a drink like she hadn't just walked out of the bathroom with another man. My chest was tight with rage, my vision tunneling on her as I closed the distance. Jenna, I called again, louder this time. Finally, she turned, her expression a mix of irritation and something else. Fear? No, not fear. Annoyance. Like I was embarrassing her in front of her precious colleagues. Can we not do this here? She hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and forced a smile for the people nearby. You're making a scene. A scene. Couldn't help it. I laughed, but it came out bitter, almost unhinged. Are you kidding me right now? I'm making a scene? What the hell was that back there? Andrew, she said through gritted teeth, leaning in close so only I could hear. Lower your voice. Why? I snapped, not caring who heard. So no one finds out what you've been doing behind my back? Because I think they'd love to know what the queen of the party gets up to in the bathroom. Her face went pale, and for a second, I thought I'd finally broken through that wall of indifference. But then she straightened her shoulders, her eyes narrowing into slits. You don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice icy. And even if you did, this is neither the time nor the place. Go home, Andrew. You've clearly had too much to drink. I stared at her, stunned. She wasn't just denying it. She was gaslighting me, acting like I was some drunken idiot imagining things. Before I could respond, a hand landed on my shoulder. I turned to see one of her coworkers, a tall, broad-shouldered guy with a polished smile that didn't reach his eyes. Everything okay here? He asked, his tone polite but loaded with the kind of passive aggression that made my blood boil. Everything's fine, Jenna said quickly, her voice sickly sweet. My husband was just leaving. I shook his hand off my shoulder, my anger boiling over. No, I'm not leaving. Not until you explain what the hell I just saw. The coworker glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe you two should take this outside, he suggested. Great idea, I said, glaring at Jenna. Let's go outside, Jenna. Let's talk about this. Right now. For a moment, she just stared at me, her jaw tight. Then she downed the rest of her drink, slammed the glass on the bar, and marched toward the exit without another word. I followed her out, the cold night air hitting me like a slap to the face. The city was alive around us. Cars honking, people laughing, the hum of nightlife, but it all felt distant, muted. All I could focus on was Jenna, standing a few feet away with her arms crossed, her breath visible in the chilly air. Are you happy now? She snapped, spinning to face me. You've embarrassed both of us in front of my colleagues. God, Andrew, why can't you just stop? I interrupted, my voice shaking. Just stop. I don't want to hear your excuses or your bullshit. I want the truth. Who the hell was that guy? Jenna? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a second, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then her face hardened, and she crossed her arms tighter. It's not what you think, she said finally. We were just talking. In a locked bathroom? I shot back. That's funny, because it sure didn't sound like talking. She rolled her eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. You're blowing this out of proportion. I don't have time for your insecurities right now, Andrew. Go home. Sleep it off. It was like being slapped in the face again. She wasn't just lying. She was dismissing me entirely, refusing to even acknowledge what she'd done. You really think I'm that stupid? I said, my voice low and dangerous. You think I didn't hear you? Didn't see you? For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw a flash of panic in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Fine, she said, throwing up her hands. Believe whatever you want. I don't care. And with that, she turned on her heel and started walking away, leaving me standing there in the cold, staring after her like an idiot that I stood there, watching her walk away, her heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots in the quiet night. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to follow her, to drag the truth out of her no matter how ugly it was. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my mind a mess of disbelief and fury. Fine. Believe whatever you want. Her words replayed in my head, over and over, each time cutting deeper than the last. She didn't even deny it, not really. She just brushed me off, like I was some pesky fly buzzing around her perfect life. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, before the door swung open behind me and the sound of the party spilled out into the street. A voice broke through the haze. You good, man? It was one of Jenna's coworkers, a younger guy I'd met once or twice at company events. He had that look of someone who didn't want to get involved but felt obligated to say something. I'm fine, I lied, my voice coming out flat. He hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the direction Jenna had gone. She left pretty quick. Everything okay between you two? I wanted to scream at him, tell him to mind his own damn business. But instead, I just shook my head. It's nothing. Go back inside. He didn't need to be told twice. With an awkward nod, he ducked back into the building, leaving me alone again. By the time I gathered the nerve to follow Jenna, she was gone. I checked the street, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but the sidewalk was empty. She'd probably grabbed a cab, disappearing into the city like a ghost. I pulled out my phone and called her. It rang once, twice, and then went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. She'd blocked me or turned off her phone. Either way, she didn't want to be found. The fury bubbling inside me was almost too much to contain. I wanted to punch something, anything, but instead, I forced myself to breathe. Don't lose it. Not yet. I headed back to the venue. I wasn't done. Inside, the party was still in full swing. People were laughing, drinking, dancing, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded outside. My eyes scanned the room, searching for him. The man. The smug bastard who'd walked out of the bathroom with my wife. It didn't take long to spot him. He was by the bar, laughing with a group of guys, his tie loosened and a whiskey in his hand. He looked so damn pleased with himself, like he didn't have a care in the world. I marched over, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't notice me until I was standing right in front of him, blocking his view. "Can I help you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. His voice was calm, casual, like I was some stranger interrupting his good time. "You can tell me what the hell you were doing with my wife," I said, my voice low but seething. His smile faltered, just for a second, but then it was back, cocky and infuriating. "I think you've got the wrong guy. Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I saw you. I heard you. You and Jenna in the bathroom. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about." The group around him had gone silent, their eyes darting between us like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. He set his drink down, his expression hardening. "Look, man, I don't know what you think you saw, but you're out of line. Out of line." I took a step closer, my fists clenched at my sides. "You're screwing my wife, and I'm out of line?" The room seemed to freeze. Conversations died, and all eyes turned to us. I could feel the weight of their stares, but I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see what kind of man he really was. "Keep your voice down," he said, his tone shifting from dismissive to warning. "You don't want to do this here." "Why not?" I shot back. "Afraid someone might find out what you are? A liar? A homewrecker?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might swing at me. Part of me hoped he would. I wanted him to give me a reason, but instead, he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Go home and sort this out with your wife." He turned to walk away, but I grabbed his arm, spinning him back around. "Don't walk away from me, you." "Andrew." Jenna's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I turned to see her standing by the door, her face a mask of fury. "Stop it," she snapped, storming toward us. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "What am I doing?" I shouted, my anger boiling over. "What the hell are you doing, Jenna?" "With him." Her eyes darted to the man, then back to me. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. "You're making a fool of yourself," she hissed. "We'll talk about this later. Let's go." "I'm not going anywhere until I get the truth," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Tell me, Jenna, right here, right now. What the hell is going on between you two?" The room was dead silent, every pair of eyes fixed on us. Jenna looked around, her cheeks flushed, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, she grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the exit. "Fine," she said through clenched teeth. "You want the truth? Let's go." Without another word, she dragged me outside, slamming the door behind us. The door slammed shut behind us, the muffled hum of the party replaced by the cold, biting silence of the night. Jenna spun to face me, her face a mix of anger and desperation. For the first time, she wasn't in control, and it showed. "Are you happy now?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone I work with." "I humiliated you?" I shot back, incredulous. "Are you out of your mind, Jenna? Do you hear yourself? You're caught. And this is what you're worried about." She flinched just slightly, but recovered fast. Caught doing what exactly, Andrew? She demanded, crossing her arms. Talking to a coworker? Is that the crime now? Don't you dare, I said, pointing a finger at her. My voice was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took to keep myself in check. Don't you dare try to twist this. I heard you. I saw you. Do you think I'm stupid? She rolled her eyes, letting out a sharp laugh. Oh, for God's sake, this is ridiculous. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like some paranoid lunatic. Stop lying, I exploded, my voice echoing down the empty street. Just stop. I know what I heard. You and that guy in the bathroom. The sounds. The whispers. Don't insult me by pretending it didn't happen. Her face changed then. The mask of indifference slipped, and for a split second, I thought I saw guilt in her eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by cold, calculated defiance. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You want the truth? Here it is. Yes, I was in the bathroom with Greg. Yes, we were talking. And yes, it got a little heated. My stomach dropped. Hearing her say his name, Greg, made it all so much worse. It wasn't just some faceless stranger anymore. It was him. But it wasn't what you think, she added quickly, stepping closer, her tone shifting to something almost pleading. It was nothing, Andrew. A stupid mistake. We had too much to drink, and things got out of hand, but it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? I repeated, my voice hollow. Do you even hear yourself right now? You cheated on me, Jenna. You betrayed me. Do you have any idea what that feels like? She sighed, exasperated, like I was being unreasonable. Andrew, I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. But do you really want to throw everything away over one stupid incident? Over something that didn't even go that far? Her words hit me like a slap. Didn't go that far? I echoed. You expect me to believe that? After what I heard? She threw her hands up in frustration. What do you want me to say? That I'm a horrible person? Fine. I screwed up. But it's not like I've been running around behind your back for years. It was one time. One mistake. The audacity of it all made my blood boil. One mistake, I said, my voice rising. You expect me to believe this is the first time? That this is the only thing you've been hiding from me? She glared at me, her jaw tight. What do you want from me, Andrew? To get down on my knees and beg for your forgiveness? Will that make you happy? I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. The way she stood there, unapologetic, daring me to make the next move. It was like she'd become a stranger overnight. No, I said finally, my voice cold. What I want is for you to tell me the truth. All of it. No more half-assed excuses, no more lies. The truth, Jenna, or we're done. She hesitated, her eyes flicking away from mine for just a moment. When she looked back, there was a hardness there I hadn't seen before. You want the truth? She said, her voice steady, almost taunting. Fine. You're right, Andrew. I haven't been happy for a long time. And yeah, I've been spending time with Greg. Because unlike you, he actually listens to me. He makes me feel alive. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, knocking the air out of my lungs. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. Do you have any idea what it's like? She continued, her voice rising. To feel invisible in your own marriage? To be stuck with someone who barely even notices you anymore? That's not fair. I managed to choke out, my voice shaking. I've always been there for you. Always. She laughed bitterly. Being there physically isn't the same as being present, Andrew. And honestly, maybe this is on you as much as it is on me. I staggered back, as if her words had physically struck me. The audacity, the cruelty of blaming me for her betrayal, it was too much. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Absolutely unbelievable. She shrugged, her face set in an infuriating mask of calm. Believe what you want, but don't pretend like you're some innocent victim in all of this. With that, she turned and started walking away again, leaving me standing there in the cold, shattered and alone. She walked away, her back straight, her pace deliberate, as though she hadn't just ripped my life apart in a matter of minutes. My chest felt like it was caving in, a mix of fury and heartbreak clawing at my throat. "Jenna!" I shouted, my voice raw. "Don't you dare walk away from me again." She stopped, turning slowly, her expression unreadable under the streetlights. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the space between us crackling with tension. "What do you want from me, Andrew?" she asked, her voice calm, too calm. "You already made up your mind, didn't you? Nothing I say is going to change how you feel." "I want answers," I said, stepping closer, my fists clenched at my sides. "Real answers. Not this deflecting, not this garbage about feeling invisible. I want to know how long this has been going on. How many times? Who else?" She let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking her head. "You think this is some big conspiracy? That I've been running around town with every guy who gives me attention? You're paranoid, Andrew. You're always looking for something that isn't there." "Don't gaslight me," I snapped. "I'm not paranoid, and you know it." "Caught you, Jenna. I caught you. Stop pretending like you're the victim here." Her eyes flashed with anger, and she took a step toward me. "You want the truth? Fine. I've been unhappy for years, Andrew. Years. And maybe I didn't handle it the right way, but you sure as hell didn't notice, did you? You were too busy with your own life to care about mine." "I didn't notice because you never said anything," I shot back. "How the hell am I supposed to fix something if you don't tell me it's broken?" She laughed again, bitter and hollow. "You think a couple of date nights or compliments would have fixed this? It's not that simple. We've been living like roommates, Andrew. You don't touch me, you don't talk to me unless it's about bills or groceries. You checked out a long time ago, and I'm done pretending that's enough for me." Her words hit me hard, but I wasn't buying it. Not entirely. "So your solution was to cheat?" I asked, my voice low, venomous. "To sneak around with Greg behind my back instead of, I don't know, talking to me? Working on this? Did you even want to fix it? Or were you just waiting for an excuse to blow it all up?" She flinched, her mask slipping for just a second before she pulled it back into place. "You don't get it," she said quietly. "You'll never get it." "No, Jenna. I get it," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You want it out. Fine. Say that. Be honest about it. But don't you dare stand there and blame me for your choices. You made this mess, not me." The street was silent except for the occasional car passing by. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression softening in a way that almost made me believe she felt remorse. "Maybe you're right," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I did make this mess. But it's not just mine to clean up, Andrew. It's ours. And I don't think you're ready to hear that." "Don't," I said, my voice cracking. "Don't you dare try to turn this into something mutual. This isn't us. This is you." For the first time that night, her composure cracked. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she turned away again, her shoulders tense. "Go home, Andrew," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. "We'll talk when you're ready to have a real conversation." I stared at her, my hands trembling with the urge to grab her, shake her, make her see what she'd done. But I couldn't, because deep down, I knew she wasn't going to give me the answers I needed. Not tonight, maybe not ever. She walked away, disappearing into the night, leaving me standing there with nothing but the echoes of her words and the weight of a marriage that felt like it had already died. I didn't go home. Couldn't. The idea of sitting in that house, the house we built together, while she was out doing God knows what with God knows who, made me feel physically ill. Instead, I drove. No destination, no plan, just endless stretches of highway as the city lights blurred into streaks of orange and white. Her words kept looping in my head, twisting themselves into daggers that stabbed deeper every time they resurfaced. "You don't touch me. You don't talk to me. You checked out a long time ago." Was that true? Had I been so blind, so distant, that she felt she had no choice but to look elsewhere? No, that was just another excuse, a flimsy shield to deflect the blame. She could have said something. She could have been honest. Instead, she chose betrayal. The thought sent a fresh wave of anger through me, and my hands tightened around the steering wheel. I needed answers. Real ones. Not the half-truths she threw at me earlier like breadcrumbs to keep me chasing her narrative. And there was only one way to get them. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, my heart racing as I opened my phone. Her texts had been eerily quiet for weeks now, no longer filled with the casual updates or random memes we used to send each other. But I had access to her phone account, something we set up years ago for convenience. I logged in. The list of recent calls and texts was right there, glaring at me in cold, clinical detail. Greg's name was everywhere. Dozens of calls, usually in the late evening when I thought she was working late or at the gym. Even more texts, some marked as pictures. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the nights she came home distant, her excuses tired and half-hearted. I scrolled further. Greg wasn't the only one. There was another number, unlisted, with an area code I didn't recognize. More calls, more texts. My stomach churned as I clicked through them, piecing together a timeline of deceit that stretched further back than I wanted to believe. The bathroom wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the tip of an iceberg I hadn't seen until it was too late. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to smash it against the dashboard, to destroy the proof and pretend this wasn't my reality. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I dialed the unknown number. It rang twice before a man's voice answered, casual and groggy, like I'd woken him up. Hello. I didn't speak right away, my throat tight with rage. When I finally found my voice, it was low and cold. Who is this? There was a pause, then the sound of rustling sheets. Who's asking? I'm Andrew, I said, my words clipped. Jenna's husband. The silence that followed was deafening. Oh, the man finally said, his tone shifting from confusion to guardedness. Listen, man, I don't think... Save it, I snapped. I know what's been going on. I just want to hear you say it. How long? He sighed. The kind of sigh that carried no remorse, just annoyance. Look, I didn't know she was married at first, okay? She didn't tell me until later. By then, we'd already... He trailed off, his meaning clear. Already what? I growled, my knuckles white against the phone. Look, man, I'm not trying to stir things up. She said things were complicated between you two, that you weren't really together anymore. I laughed bitterly. That's the story she gave you? That we're not really together? Well, yeah, he said, defensive now. And honestly, the way she talked about you, it sounded like you barely cared about her. Like you were more of a roommate than a husband. His words hit me harder than I expected, but I pushed the sting aside. How long? I asked again, my voice flat. 6 months, he admitted after a pause. But it's been over for a while now. She ended it weeks ago. Look, man, I'm sorry, okay? If I'd known... I hung up before he could finish. 6 months. 6 months of lies, of sneaking around, of making me believe everything was fine while she carried on her little side life. And that was just him. God only knew how long things with Greg had been going on, or if there were others. I sat there in the parking lot, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of it all. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, had been lying to me for months, maybe years. And for what? Because I didn't touch her enough? Because I didn't talk to her the way Greg or some random guy on her phone did. It wasn't enough. None of it was enough to justify what she'd done. But as the anger churned in my chest, another thought crept in, quiet but insistent. What if this was just the beginning? What else was I about to uncover? And more importantly, was I ready to face it? By the time I got home, the adrenaline from the call had burned off, leaving me with a hollow ache in my chest and a gnawing pit in my stomach. The house was dark, silent, like it was waiting for the storm I knew was coming. Jenna's car wasn't in the driveway. She hadn't come home, and I had no idea where she was. It didn't matter. I wasn't ready to see her yet. I headed straight to our bedroom, flipping on the light and staring at the space we'd shared for years. The bed, the photos on the dresser, the stupid decorative pillows she insisted we buy. All of it felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone else's life. But there was one thing I needed. Her laptop sat on her side of the desk, the screen dark but taunting. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but after everything I discovered tonight, pride didn't matter anymore. I wanted the truth, all of it, and if she wasn't going to give it to me, I'd find it myself. Took me a minute to guess her password. Her childhood dog's name, followed by her birth year. She'd always been predictable like that. The screen unlocked, and I dove in, opening her email, her browser history, her messages. Anything that might fill in the gaps of the story she was so eager to hide. It didn't take long. The emails were the worst. Dozens of threads with Greg, filled with inside jokes, late-night plans, and, of course, pictures. I didn't open the photos. I didn't need to. The captions were enough. Thinking about last night. Can't wait to see you again. You looked so good in that dress today. Could barely concentrate. When are you telling him? That one stopped me cold. When are you telling him? The timestamp was from weeks ago. Long before the bathroom incident. Long before tonight's disaster. She wasn't just cheating. She'd been planning her exit, crafting a story to make herself look like the victim while leaving me in the dust. I slammed the laptop shut, my breathing ragged. My hands were trembling, but I wasn't sure if it was from rage or devastation. Probably both. I couldn't sit still. I paced the bedroom, running my hands through my hair, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts tearing through my mind. But it was no use. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her laugh, imagined her with him, or with the stranger from earlier. The walls felt like they were closing in. So I grabbed my coat and walked out the front door, letting the cold night air slap me awake. The streets were quiet, the kind of eerie silence that comes when the world is asleep, and you're the only one left awake with your demons. I didn't have a destination. I just walked, my mind replaying every interaction with Jenna over the past year, searching for signs I'd missed. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in going to the gym, the way she always had her phone glued to her hand, the screen tilted away from me. It was all so obvious now, but back then, I trusted her. I believed her. That trust was gone, replaced by something darker, heavier. I ended up at a park near our house, sitting on a bench under the dim glow of a street lamp. The cold seeped through my coat, but I didn't care. I stared at the ground, trying to piece together what my next move should be. Leaving her felt like the obvious choice. She destroyed everything we had, lied to my face, and disrespected me in ways I couldn't even begin to process. But the thought of walking away, of giving up on the life we'd built, filled me with a kind of grief I wasn't ready to confront. I needed to talk to her. Not to argue, not to yell, but to finally rip off the mask she was hiding behind and see the truth. The whole truth. And if she wouldn't give it to me willingly, I'd take it. As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be Jenna, finally ready to face the music. But it wasn't her. It was Greg. The message was simple, but it hit like a bullet. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't know what he wanted to say, but I wasn't about to ignore him. Fine, I replied, my fingers moving before my brain could catch up. Where? He responded almost immediately, sending an address to a bar on the other side of town. It wasn't a place I'd ever been, but I didn't hesitate. I stood, slipping the phone back into my pocket, and started walking toward my car. If Greg wanted to talk, I was ready to listen, but I wasn't leaving without answers. The bar was tucked into a side street, the kind of place that didn't advertise itself but somehow always had a crowd. A neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a faint red glow over the entrance. I parked across the street and sat in the car for a minute, staring at the door. My chest felt heavy, the air in the car too thick to breathe. Greg wanted to talk, but about what? Was he about to confess everything? Was he going to beg me not to ruin his life? Or was this some kind of power move, him marking his territory now that the cracks in my marriage were exposed? I didn't care. Whatever he wanted, I was ready. I got out of the car and walked in, the smell of stale beer and cheap cologne hitting me the moment I opened the door. The place was dimly lit, the music low and unremarkable. I scanned the room until I spotted him, sitting alone at a table in the corner with a beer in front of him. Greg looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. He gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Andrew," he said, nodding in greeting. I sat down, leaning back in the chair with my arms crossed. "Start talking," I said, my voice cold and steady. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't call you here to fight," he said. I think you deserve to know what's really going on." "That's funny," I said, letting out a bitter laugh. "Because my wife doesn't seem to think I deserve the truth. So go ahead, Greg. Enlighten me. He flinched at the edge in my voice but didn't argue. Instead, he took a swig of his beer and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. This thing with Jenna, it's complicated. Spare me the cliches, I snapped. How long? His eyes dropped to the table. Almost a year, he admitted quietly. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. So, the bathroom wasn't the first time? No, he said, shaking his head. It wasn't. I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into my palms under the table. And you didn't think it was important to let me know my wife was screwing around with you for an entire year? I didn't know she was married at first, he said, his voice defensive. She didn't tell me. I only found out a few months in. By then I was already… He trailed off, his meaning clear. Already what? I asked, my voice sharp. In love with her? Is that what you're going to say? He looked at me, his expression conflicted. Yeah, he admitted. I fell for her. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face impassive. And what about now? I asked. You still in love with her? He hesitated, his fingers tapping against the table. No, he said finally. Not anymore. Things started falling apart between us a few weeks ago. She told me she didn't want to see me anymore. Why? He gave a humorless laugh. She said she wanted to fix things with you, that she didn't want to throw away her marriage. I stared at him, my mind racing. Jenna had said none of this to me. No apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. Just anger, deflection, and blame. Did she tell you about the other guy? I asked suddenly, my voice like ice. Greg blinked, surprised. What other guy? I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You really thought you were the only one? God, you're dumber than I thought. His face darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might snap back. But instead, he just slumped in his chair, looking defeated. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, he muttered. She's complicated. Complicated, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. That's one way to put it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between us. Finally, Greg spoke again, his voice quiet but firm. Look, man, he said, meeting my eyes. I'm not trying to make excuses for what I did. I messed up. But Jenna, she's not who you think she is. She's been playing both of us. I stared at him, my anger warring with something else. Something darker. What do you mean? He leaned back, his expression grim. She's not just looking for attention, Andrew. She's looking for control. She played me against you, just like she's probably playing you against someone else. She doesn't care about either of us. She just cares about herself. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to argue, to defend her, but the evidence was piling up. Jenna wasn't just a cheater. She was a manipulator. And suddenly, I realized that this wasn't just about the affairs. This was about the person she truly was, a person I'd been too blind to see. I stood up, grabbing my coat. Thanks for the chat, Greg, I said, my voice cold. But I think I've heard enough. He didn't try to stop me. As I walked out of the bar, the cold night air hit me like a slap. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing the illusion of the life I thought I had. That I drove home in silence, the streetlights streaking past like faint reminders of a world that had moved on while mine fell apart. Greg's words echoed in my mind. She's been playing both of us. She doesn't care about either of us. I wanted to reject it, to cling to the idea that there was still some version of Jenna worth salvaging. But the evidence was piling up like bricks, each one crushing the image I'd built of her over the years. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. My stomach twisted. She was back. I stepped inside, the house dark except for the faint glow of the kitchen light. Jenna was sitting at the table, a glass of wine in front of her, her phone on the counter next to it. She didn't look up when I walked in, her gaze fixed on the swirling red liquid in her glass. You've been busy, I said, closing the door behind me. My voice was steady, too steady. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. Where have you been? Out, I said simply, kicking off my shoes and tossing my keys on the counter. Where were you? her lips pressed into a thin line. I went for a drive. I needed to clear my head after everything. Everything, I repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. You mean getting caught with Greg? Or the fact that your little side game is falling apart? She stiffened, her hand tightening around the glass. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, come on, Jenna, I said, leaning against the counter. Greg told me everything. A year with him, and you think you can still play innocent. Her face faltered for a moment, but then she recovered, her expression hardening. So you met with Greg, she said, her tone cold. What did he tell you? That I'm some kind of monster? That I'm the only one to blame for this mess? You are to blame, I snapped. Don't twist this around. You lied to me. You cheated. And not just with him, apparently. How many others, Jenna? How many more? Her eyes flashed with anger, and she slammed the glass down on the table. I don't owe you a confession, Andrew, she said sharply. You're not a saint in this marriage, either. Don't pretend like you've been some perfect husband. Oh, don't you dare, I said, my voice rising. Don't you dare try to spin this around on me. I've been here. I've been faithful. And you've been out there, screwing around with anyone who gives you attention. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think it's that simple? That I just woke up one day and decided to cheat? Do you have any idea what it's like to live with someone who doesn't see you? Who doesn't make you feel like you matter? I didn't see you? I shot back. I didn't make you feel like you mattered? What the hell do you think I've been doing all these years, Jenna? Paying the bills? Planning trips? Trying to make a life with you? That's not enough for you. It's not about the bills or the trips, she yelled. It's about how you make me feel. Or don't, rather. You've been so caught up in your own world. Andrew, you didn't even notice me slipping away. Her words hit me like a slap, but this time they didn't stick. I'd heard enough excuses, enough blame shifting. This isn't about me, I said, my voice low but firm. This is about you, about the choices you made, the lies you told. You destroyed this marriage, Jenna, not me. For a moment, the fight drained out of her, and she sank back into her chair. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy but defiant. Fine, she said quietly. I made mistakes, but don't act like you're some victim here. We both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time. I stared at her, my chest tightening. If it wasn't working, you should have said something, I said. You should have talked to me. We could have fixed it. Instead, you decided to burn it all down behind my back. She looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass. Maybe I didn't think it was fixable, she admitted. Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. I took a step back, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep pretending there's something left to save. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. Andrew, no, I said, cutting her off. This is done, Jenna. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. She didn't respond. For the first time all night, she looked small, like the weight of her actions had finally hit her. But I didn't care anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there in the glow of the kitchen light, the cracks in her facade finally visible. The bedroom felt colder than it should have, even with the heater on. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment, letting the silence settle over me. My chest was tight, my mind racing, but for the first time all night, I felt a strange clarity. This was over. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, just enough to get me through the next few days. Each item I tossed into the bag felt like a piece of my life falling away. A life I thought was stable, secure. A lie. The door creaked open behind me, and I turned to see Jenna standing there, her face pale and drawn. She wasn't the defiant woman from earlier, the one who had spat excuses and deflections like venom. She looked different now. Tired. You're leaving, she said, her voice barely audible. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said simply, zipping the bag shut. She stepped into the room, her hands clasped in front of her like she didn't know what to do with them. Where are you going? To clear my head, I replied. To get some space from all this. She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. I didn't think it would end like this, she murmured. Neither did I said, slinging the bag over my shoulder. But you made that decision for both of us, didn't you? Her head snapped up, and for a moment, I thought she was going to argue again. But instead, her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Jenna, you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed us. And for what? For Greg? For whoever else? Was it worth it? She didn't answer. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. Andrew, she said finally, her voice trembling, I know I messed up. I know I broke your trust. But I still love you. My chest tightened at her words, but the anger flared up just as quickly. You don't get to say that, I said, my voice sharp. You don't get to say you love me after everything you've done. Love isn't just a word, Jenna. It's actions. And your actions told me exactly how you feel. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Couldn't care. Not anymore. I'll stay somewhere else tonight, I said, walking past her toward the door. You can have the house for now. I'll figure out what happens next. She reached out, her fingers brushing my arm. Andrew, please, can we just talk? Really talk. I stopped, looking down at her hand, then back at her face. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Pity, maybe. Sadness for the woman I thought I knew, for the life we'd built that was now in ruins. But it wasn't enough. We've been talking all night, I said, stepping out of her reach. And all you've done is lie, deflect, and blame me for your mistakes. I'm done, Jenna. I can't do this anymore. Her tears spilled over then, but I turned away before they could affect me. I walked down the hall, through the living room, and out the front door, letting it close behind me with a soft click. The night air was freezing, biting at my skin as I stood on the porch, staring at the street ahead. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. Anywhere was better than here. I got in my car and drove, my grip tight on the wheel, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This was the end. And for the first time all night, I felt a strange, bittersweet relief. The motel I checked into wasn't much. A peeling sign, a flickering light in the lobby, but it was enough. It was quiet. For the first time in hours, I was alone with my thoughts. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the duffel bag I'd tossed onto the floor. My life, condensed into a few items thrown together in anger. I couldn't tell if I wanted to cry or scream, so I did neither. Instead, I sat there, letting the silence stretch around me. Jenna's words replayed in my mind like a bad song on repeat. I still love you. Was it true? Did she mean it? Or was it just another desperate attempt to hold on to something she'd already shattered? Did it even matter anymore? I pulled out my phone, scrolling aimlessly through my messages. There was nothing from her. No apologies, no explanations. Just silence. And that was when it hit me. I've been waiting for her to fix this. Waiting for her to take responsibility, to show remorse, to make me believe there was something left to salvage. But why? She'd made her choices. She'd shown me who she was. What more did I need? I set the phone down and leaned back against the headboard, closing my eyes. For so long, I defined myself by our marriage, by being Jenna's husband. I thought it was the foundation of my life, something unshakable. But now I saw it for what it was. A foundation built on sand. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need her lies, her manipulation, her half-hearted promises of love. What I needed was to figure out who I was without her. The next morning, I woke up early, the pale light of dawn filtering through the thin curtains. I grabbed my laptop and started looking up divorce lawyers. The thought made my chest tighten, but I pushed through it. This was my next step. By the time I checked out of the motel, I had a plan. I'd find a lawyer, sort through the logistics of splitting everything, and get her out of my life for good. I wasn't naive. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Jenna wasn't the kind of person who let go without a fight. But I was done fighting for someone who wouldn't fight for me. As I drove back toward the city, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with pain and messy decisions, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in her shadow. I wasn't chasing her approval or begging for scraps of her attention. I was free, and that, I realized, was the start of something new, something better,